Guys, how's it going? My name is Megan Sidlecki, and today I am going to present to you some of the steps in the underwriting process that we tend to see on a day-to-day basis for underwriters on the carrier side. So to start off, let's see if I can move this. All right, so the most important first step is evaluating the submission. We go in next into developing underwriting alternatives, selecting an underwriting alternative from the selection that you've created, determining an appropriate premium, implementing the underwriting decision, as well as monitoring the underwriting decisions. Now, this is just an outline. I'm going to kind of get into more detail step by step as we go forward throughout this. Okay, and I hope you enjoy the gifts that I put on. I have a large array of Friends, The Office, Parks and Rec gifts for you guys to enjoy. I know this isn't as entertaining as in person, but we're going to make it work. So here we go. Okay. Evaluating the submission, in my opinion, I think is one of the most important steps in the underwriting process. So this involves the actual submission of the application. So this gives us a full rundown of who the insured is, what their business operations are, their character, their capacity, and how they operate their business. And this is information obtained directly from the applicant. So what an underwriter will do is they'll look over this information and try to determine what exactly is important, what aspects of their operations can we use, what loss exposures are present here. So this is a really, really important step, and if this isn't well done and if it's not properly gone through, then this can be a big problem, and it can cause many errors in the underwriting process from this step forward. So an underwriting submission is all the information of an initial application or a substantive policy, midterm or renewal change as well. Those are also included in my definition here. So some important points I want you guys to be aware of. We're evaluating loss exposures and associated hazards here. So as I'm sure you remember from Daniel Brown's class, a loss exposure is a condition that presents the possibility of a loss, and then a hazard is a condition that increases the frequency and severity of said loss. And our goal here is to obtain information efficiency. The textbook really made an effort to accentuate this point. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware. Achieving information efficiency, just making sure that we have all of the ducks in a row. We have a full understanding of who the applicant is, what their operations are, their capacity, financial capacity, as well as their character as well. Okay, so step 2 is developing underwriting alternatives. So here is kind of where we make that decision whether we want to accept, reject, or make a counter offer to accept the submission. For a counter offer, this could be pending specified modifications. That's important to know as well. Some of the major types of modifications we tend to see are the requirement of risk control measures. A good example that I like to think of is, hiring security guards for, preventing frequency and severity of losses, kind of retaining that risk a little bit. Sprinkler systems to help prevent the spread of fires for property risk, things like that. Changing rates, plans, or policy limits. These are all really important as well. I won't go into too much detail with these, but 3 types of rating are experience rating, schedule rating, and retrospective rating. The textbook talks about these briefly, but it wasn't super accentuated in the chapter, so I'll go ahead and move forward. Another type of modification is to amend policy terms and conditions or use facultative reinsurance. These are some of the changes that underwriters can make, whether they're deciding to accept or reject a policy. Okay, so step 3 is selecting an underwriting alternative. Underwriters here, they attempt to make submissions acceptable whenever possible because they want what's best for their client. These factors should always be considered that the textbook mentions. Underwriting authority, so if you're an associate underwriter and you need a managing director or a senior account executive to look over and make sure that this type of applicant can be accepted, that's what they mean by underwriting authority. Supporting businesses, a mix of business. So these are kind of referring to the book of business that the carrier side maintains. Producer relationships for the applicant. This is a really important one. You can kind of see Amy Poehler and Tina Fey kind of high-fiving. That's what I think of when I think of like a good producer-carrier relationship. You want to make sure that they're happy and that, when they're going back to their insured, that they have good news and that they know we're trying to work with them as best as possible. And then also regulatory restrictions as well. So step 4 entails kind of determining an appropriate premium. This is a really difficult step and it requires a lot of analysis, and this is where the underwriting gets kind of pretty deep. So the underwriter here determines whether each loss exposure is being calculated for correctly and they're being properly classified so that these loss exposures are properly rated with an appropriate premium charged. You want to make sure that you're finding equity between setting an appropriate premium that is, enough that we can maintain solvency as insurance carriers, but we also don't want to charge so much that the insured looks elsewhere. So another important point from this section of the textbook goes into loss costs. And this is the portion of rate that covers the projected claim payments and loss adjustment expenses, kind of what I was touching on a couple minutes ago. But these loss costs and determining appropriate premiums, these are all based on a classification system. So it ensures a pool of loss exposures with similar frequencies and severities. Okay, step 5 is implementing the underwriting decision. There's 3 tasks here that we tend to associate with this step of the underwriting process. Firstly, the underwriting decision is communicated to the producer, and this just helps clarify standards and helps the producer understand what kinds of business the insurer wants to write. Issuing required documents. If you guys have ever heard the term, binding before, this is kind of where, when a policy hasn't gone into writing just yet, an insurer or a binding document kind of sets that insurance in motion before kind of all the logistical documentation is kind of put into place. This includes certificates of insurance as well. These are all required documents that we tend to see on the underwriting side. And then thirdly, recording data about the applicant, just to, maintain efficiency in the policy issuing, accounting, statistical monitoring purposes, things like that. Okay, and step 6, this is the last one of the underwriting process, and this is monitoring the underwriting decisions. This probably takes a good majority of the time in the cyclical underwriting process. Usually when we come up on renewals, it's the end of the year or end of the policy period, and we're kind of evaluating our insureds, making sure that they're on the right track, that there aren't any new loss exposures that we're finding that could be a risk to the company. This is where we're kind of observing and taking notes, making sure none of that is a danger to the company. So right here, we are ensuring some of these quote unquote satisfactory results. Underwriters should continue to watch for sudden changes like significant or maybe unique loss occurrences that the company has throughout the policy period. Policy change requests, sometimes they make out of the blue change requests, and we kind of have to go look into it, look at their financials, see how they're doing, making sure that everything's on track. Risk control and safety inspection reports is another important thing that we look at as underwriters, in addition to premium audit results. So here in this step, we're kind of evaluating the quality and the profitability of our book of business and each company specifically that is deemed an insured for an insurance carrier. So, yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.